because in some circles, if you say that your work is very democratic, it means that you're dumbing it down. Whereas I was trying to push it towards an accessibility that raised the level of conversation. This piece is called Portrait Project, and what I would do is go to various public venues and set up a little kiosk that looked like, you know, you go to Fisherman's Wharf and there's a caricature drawer and they'll sell you your picture. But with these, I engaged people walking by, random folks off the street, and asked them to draw my portrait that I would then purchase from them. So I was exchanging the role of artist and collector, purveyor, and passerby. And the conversations that ensued, like getting people to step out of their comfort zone, they were like, even when you offer them money, so many people were hesitant. They're like, I can't draw, I can't do that, I can't. They've been told, I can't. Don't, you're not an artist. But you give them this opportunity, and there is such joy, you know, in just taking that step. So crossing that boundary was really exciting for me. And then this piece was another one where I crossed boundaries. It's called Colony. It's been in Italy and it's been shown here in San Francisco. And the idea was to play with the idea of appropriation and transubstantiation. So what I did was I appropriated several well-known works of art, Ana Menendez, Tom Marioni, and Felix Gonzalez Torres. So here I sort of appropriated Tom Marioni's piece, drawing a line as far as I could reach. And what I did is I drew a line that described the extent of my reach. And then I filled that circle with compost and soil from my garden. I've been at the same location and building soil and creating soil. So it really is like a transubstantiation, taking that soil, moving it to the gallery space, and then you can see here there's a little bucket with bags. So people were then allowed to dig their hands into that dirt or dig their hands into my body. See in the first slide, that's my height, width, depth, so that's the shape of my body. Thank you, Ana Menendez. And that's the soil. So it's exactly the same mass as my body. And people from all over the world have taken the soil and used it to start their own compost or planted flowers in it or just scattered it in their garden. So again, it was that idea of sharing and interacting and crossing lines and creating a new kind of intimacy. And all of this, it's interrelational work, but it sort of led me back to this idea of making objects and making things that are a little bit more traditional. So I was very interested in Braille and this idea of reading and language and a coding system that sighted people don't use, because we think about language and reading as something that's all in our eyes, and yet it can be a full sensory experience. And when you take the eye out of reading and just give someone this coded system to interact with, there's an intimacy and a curiosity that's sparked, and also the idea of getting people in a gallery situation to put their hands on the walls, to put their hands on the art. That's like such a big taboo, and I've usually had to either be physically present in the gallery or have attendants there so that they can encourage people to touch the work. Now these Braille pieces that I'm showing now are all done with casts from my body. So there are teeth, fingertips, nipples, there's some lips later maybe in here. And they're adhered and painted and lit so that when you first walk in, you can't really see them, and you can only see them by touching them. And as more and more people interact with the piece, it leaves traces and details start to become apparent. And especially with the nipple pieces, people tend to get a little freaked out when they realize that they've just been rubbing their hands along the line of my nipples. But it is kind of an intimate gesture, you know? You think about, it's the first thing that you interact with as a baby. When you're coming out of the womb, it's like, it's life. It's not just porn or sex, it's life. And there's actually fingertips on the other side over here. But this image of one of the viewers where she found herself unconsciously touching her own breast as she was reading the piece, I thought was really fascinating, that kind of shared impulse to explore her own body while reading the Braille piece here. And this piece, again, white on white, lit to be really difficult to see, so difficult to document. This piece is called I Am, and that's what the Braille says. And you had to climb up a ladder about 7 feet, and the Braille is in teeth from my mouth. And people were able to like reach up and run their fingers along my teeth while perched on this very precarious ladder. So this is someone interacting with a piece called This Much, and it changes configurations wherever it's installed. This version was 10 feet by 26 feet, and it just repeats the word this much over and over again because it is this much. It takes up the whole wall or the whole space. And it also describes how much people are able to touch. So they're my fingertips, and again, people are coming into the space and we're touching each other, except that we're not touching each other, but we are touching each other. And this much of the piece gets read every time someone touches it, but this much of it exists. So it plays with the idea of spatiality, the sort of Cartesian points on the wall, but they all become blurred lines, and people are creating their own corner of this much with the piece. And yeah, here's another one where you can't see it, and I'm so sorry it showed up on my computer screen. But you can see there's some tiny little bits of color over here on the wall where I decided to do something that was a little bit more pop arty and even a little bit more intimate. Those are Nico candy dots. So I started doing candy Braille on the wall, and you would read that with your tongue by licking it off the wall. And that was a fun one to get the first few people to try. And the pieces start off here, there's a little disinfectant that's usually somewhere between 80 and 100 proof vodka that we squirt on the wall after each person reads the piece. So it becomes progressively more alcoholic, which helps people to relax. And you can see that after a while, people just sort of start enjoying themselves. And it also starts to bleed down the wall, creating these little color field paintings. And the pieces also dissolve and disintegrate, and just you'll end up with nothing but the traces of saliva, alcohol, and food coloring. It starts off a little bit like that. Oops. Yeah, we're missing some color definition here, but you can see that they're blending and bleeding and disappearing. And the funny story about all of these slides and the idea of plastic art in the digital age is that with plastic art, you do have something, you do have something to go back and reshoot when your computer's stolen and you lose all your documentation, which happened to me. So I'm going to be brief tonight and say thank you. Sorry about so few slides. That's me.
I have questions. Maybe somebody or
reading Braille. How many people who have read Braille before it can read Braille, and how did you deal with that?
Well, I deal with it by titling the pieces what they say, but I don't put the titles on the wall with the pieces. I keep them separate in a little book that people have to go back and reference.
So I was expecting a presentation mostly on plastic, but actually, I don't know if it's just the slides, just the projects you picked, if it's a general theme, but I was counting out of these projects, a lot of them have to do with the comfort zone, right? Mm-hmm. We're playing with that area that we don't think about, but when you have to actually enter it, we don't usually feel comfortable. Right. Like touching somebody's nipples, right? and so forth. So is this a general theme in your work, or it comes out
Yeah, I would say it is a general theme, crossing boundaries and intimacy, and sort of challenging people to question their own notions of what's acceptable, you know? And it definitely stems from the fact that I'm a very touchy person, and since I was tiny, the refrain that is always played in my head from hearing it so often is, don't touch the artwork, don't touch this, don't touch that, because I'd go into a museum like 10, 11 years old and I'd be like, ah, you know, both hands on it and always getting chased off, so.
So the one with the candies, not only you touch it, but you destroy it.
Yes.
Right? Eventually disappears.
Eventually it disappears. People take a little bit of it away with them. And the other fun part about the candy Braille is that it's adhered to the wall with my saliva. Because the sugars are so potent that I just lick each dot and stick it on the wall. So when you're licking the candy, you're actually getting a little kiss.
Yes.
How do you encourage people to engage your work?
Usually I will start by engaging with it myself and having some attendants in the gallery engage with it. And then if I see people standing and being a little bit hesitant, I'll approach them or have an attendant approach them. And then there becomes sort of a critical or a tipping point where once enough people have started touching, then other people feel free to do that. Or I just shove them right into the wall.
You kind of challenge authority with the health department, say with this. And the compost, you said it went worldwide?
It did. We went to Croatia, Italy. I think there was some that went to Spain. There was some that went to China, Canada, and then a couple other places in the United States. Yeah.
People that have had stuff taken away because of agricultural.
Yeah, I guess if you just have a small handful of it and you label it fine art, you put it away. Yeah.
That's an interesting tip. Thank you for the tip.
Sausage.
Yeah, I'm wondering where you want, if you have ideas of where you want to take this in terms of perhaps culture change and what inhibits you from getting there.
Well, gosh, airfare costs. No, I think I said this in my little brief that I'll be moving to Tokyo soon, and I'm very excited about the challenges with taking this work to somewhere like Japan, where there is even more of a cultural taboo against touching things or things that might be germy or unsterile, and how that will change the way that I present the work or change the way that I install the pieces, and how I'll have to sort of manipulate that and deal with the language barrier, the cultural barrier, and still be able to encourage that intimacy.
Do you think you'll be able to get a bunch of Japanese people to kiss each other on 3 cheeks the way some Europeans do?
Maybe if I put candy dots on my cheeks.
There you go.
Other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a similar actually question. I was just wondering, if you've noticed differences in cultures in different places that you presented, what people's reactions?
Well, it's been like Western places so far, and it's kind of similar. That sort of like the reticence at first, then a couple glasses of wine, and then somebody's friend did it, or I'll come up and sort of like dare them. I'm like, oh, come on, you're not scared of a little artwork, are you? Come on, everybody else is doing it. And then it happens, and then we start seeing it sort of avalanche from there. Hannah?
Yeah, the question that I have is, what lessons, you in a way already have alluded to it, but what lessons did you learn of overcoming other taboos in addition to that? Like, can it be transferred, or are there some strategies to overcome it? Also just talking about the power of taboo.
Yeah, there is definitely that, and part of the taboo of putting my body directly into the gallery space, like embedded into the wall, there's this notion of access to power that seems so difficult to overcome sometimes. You know, if you're not part of the in circle, if you're not part of the in crowd, if you haven't like been discovered at 22 like Basquiat and propelled into fame and given license to be a bad boy, especially if you're a girl, how to obliquely approach this topic and to be a strong artist who's a woman but who doesn't want to like go around going, I'm a girl, look at my nipples. You know, it's kind of this thing. By painting them white, by making them visibly rather inaccessible, it becomes more approachable. It's sort of like a back door into it. But it still offers people ultimately the opportunity to interact directly with me. And that, I think, is, for most artists, what they're seeking. They're seeking that one-on-one interaction with the viewer. You know, you want everyone to approach the work and to feel a special relationship with it. And so that's, you know, that's really what I'm trying to do, is to give each person that moment of intimacy. You know, because you can't all see or feel the same thing because you're at a different place in a line or a different place on the wall. But it's something similar, but it's something very unique.
But in each one of those acts of intimacy, there's an intermediary, that's the artwork. And how do you feel associated with that kind of interaction vis-a-vis someone just directly talking to you?
Well, there's always going to be an intermediary. That's why there's art. I can't be everywhere all the time with every single person. But that idea of transubstantiation, you know, this is my body, take of it, have community from this artwork, which then becomes this avatar of me.
Okay, how do you deal with this aspect of you, the artist, and the fact that the art is so ephemeral?
Sorry?
Ephemeral.
Ephemeral.
Oh, I'm sorry, I don't understand.
Art is ephemeral.
Art is ephemeral, yes. I'm not
Because
sure I
it's
get
changing, and at times it's destroyed, and this is something that you created. Most artists are very possessive of their work.
Well, it's not about the piece as a physical structure as much as it is about creating that moment or creating that interaction. And that's why I showed the earlier social relational pieces, because to me this is definitely a branch or an offshoot of those pieces where I'm setting up a situation. I might be there, I might not, but I am there, but I'm not. And people can interact with it and be present with me. But the piece will disappear or change over time. Yeah. Sorry.
Just real quick. So you talked about going to Japan because you're going there to kind of meet a culture that's maybe a lot more reserved. But what if you could meet with a culture that was a lot less reserved than even like the Western culture or something? I don't know. Like they're a lot more cool with being intimate. And like, where would you go with that?
Gosh, I don't know. That's a really interesting question. I think I might use teeth casts a lot more. They're a little sharper, a little bit less touchy-feely than some of the other body parts. Or maybe I would use sour candy instead of sweet candy. Say worse nasty things in Braille. Oh. Surprise! I'm done. Thank you all so much for coming out, and thank